The Toronto Blue Jays didn't just tweak the roster heading into 2026, they changed the blueprint. What carried this team in 2025 might no longer be the focal point, and that shift could explain how Toronto still wins a lot of games next season. So listen, I know it is all doom and gloom right now after losing out on Bo Bichette and Kyle Tucker, and I'm not going to sit here and tell you that those aren't big losses, because they are, and adding either one of them to this lineup would have been huge for this team. However, I am going to argue today that I think we need to start thinking about this team's identity a little differently. And I think that if we start doing that, those losses aren't going to feel so depressing. They're not completely season killers. And I still look at this team and I look at them as serious World Series threats. Looking over at the lineup, it has taken a step back. I know that Okamoto could be really solid and he could have a ceiling, but at the end of the day, Bo Bichette is still Bo Bichette and we know what he can provide. So this lineup, yes, it has taken a step back, and it might not be first in batting average and first in on base next year, third in OPS. It might not do that, but I do think that we're going to see some significant improvements from the rest of the team, specifically the starting pitchers and the bullpen pitchers. Flashing over here, folks, can you believe all of the pitchings? I actually, it shocks me when I look at how rough the pitching was last year for Toronto, and then consider that they made it to the World Series. They were 6th in home runs given up last year, 6th worst with 209. That's the entire pitching staff. Their ERA, their team-wide ERA, was 19th. That was sandwiched between the New York Mets, who we claim doesn't have a strong pitching staff, and they don't. You look at their starting pitchers, and it's David Peterson and Clay Holmes and a bunch of rookies. They were slightly better than us, and just behind us was the Chicago White Sox. So that's not a good spot to be. And when you look at some of those numbers, you think to yourself, how on earth did this team make it all the way to the World Series? We can even get a little bit more specific and granular with it. Looking over at the starting pitchers versus the bullpen here, the starting pitching was 20th in terms of ERA. That is not very good. They were 28th in home runs given up. So the long ball was a big problem for the starting pitchers. And then you look over at the bullpen here, slightly below average in terms of ERA as well. But for them, it wasn't as much as the long ball. They were 13th in home runs given up. I do think a lot of those home runs were probably Jeff Hoffman, because that was his big problem. But their big issue was that they issued a ton of free passes and were 23rd in walks per 9. So as a whole, we look at last season and we think about it so successfully. That was a team that they went when the offense went. And if the offense did not go, then they did not go. And very rarely did we have series that transpired where the Toronto Blue Jays offense went cold and we still won the series. Whereas in seasons prior, I believe it was 2023, that was the complete identity of the Toronto Blue Jays. And it was our starting pitchers were incredible. We had 4 really top tier individuals, and maybe you could even argue 5, honestly, in that rotation, and they were all starting and all giving us a chance to win, and that was the strength of the team. And then in 2025, it just completely flipped, and it was offense incredible, pitching not so good. This year, in 2026, walking into 2026, I think that they have the roster to be able to marry both of those things and overall become a more complete team. Looking over here, guys, considering the starting rotation that they walked in with in 2025 compared to now, I mean, it is dramatically different, right? You still have Kevin Gausman slotted in right there. Shout out to Damon right here for tweeting this out. Kevin Gausman at the 2 spot, I guess, in the rotation. But instead of Jose Barrios arguably being your ace, you have Dylan Cease in that spot now. Max Scherzer, we were very excited about Mad Max, and I still loved having him on the team, but ultimately, from just a production standpoint, I think that we can argue that either one of Trey Savage, Shane Bieber, or Cody Ponce is likely to do better than what Max Scherzer eventually did with Toronto, and that's who you have in there instead of Max Scherzer, instead of Chris Bassett, and instead of Bowden Francis. All three of those individuals right now, they're still looking for teams. Or, well, Bowden Francis not so much, but, you know, Chris Bassett and Max Scherzer, they're still on free agency right now. And that doesn't even factor in that Jose Barrios is in the bullpen with Eric Lauer. So you think about that starting rotation as it was then compared to now, and there is a dramatic shift in just overall talent and upside. And I know that we are looking at things through rose-colored glasses, and maybe Dylan Cease doesn't get back to where he used to be. I'm trying to play devil's advocate here. Maybe he doesn't end up getting back to where he used to be, or maybe there's an injury and we could be right back where we were last year. But overall, I do think that this pitching staff has dramatically improved. And when you look at the lineup, yes, it has taken a step back, but I think that the gains made on the pitching staff outweigh the losses made in the offense. Let's take a look at the WAR here. This is the overall pitching WAR, projected rotation WAR. So this doesn't factor in, at least to my knowledge, bullpen. This is starters. And right here, Thomas Nestico, shout out to him. He's got the Toronto Blue Jays, and this isn't just him, but this is, you know, the projected WAR by, I believe it is Fangraphs. Sixth, is the Toronto Blue Jays for their rotation, their starting rotation. When you consider where they were last year, 20th in ERA, 17th in WHIP from the starters. This is all the starters. 28th in home runs given up. If they were to become, as this graphic suggests, a top 10 unit, a top 6 unit even, in those categories, think about what that's going to do for the team. Yeah, we might not be blowing squads out or scoring 30 runs a series anymore. That might not be the way or the identity of the 2026 Toronto Blue Jays. But to be completely honest with you, that was an unsustainable way of winning in 2025. The offense caught fire and they were incredible, but that's uncharacteristic. And you look at the World Series run, and it took them putting up historic numbers for us to get there. Do I want to rely on Ernie Clement setting quite literally, getting the most hits in postseason history to make it to the World Series, or Vladimir Guerrero Jr. hitting a home run at will in the playoffs? Like, that's awesome when it happens, but I don't know if we should be walking into the season relying on that to go and to bring us back to the playoffs. There needs to be a little bit more depth to this team, and I think that that's what we have right now with this pitching staff and with the bullpen as well, right? Like, let's talk a little bit about that bullpen. It has also made some dramatic improvements, even though they just brought in Tyler Rogers, who, by the way, I think we haven't given enough flowers to. Incredible stuff. I was thinking about this the other day. An ERA under 2, 77.1 innings pitched, and multiple times in his career has pitched the most games out of the bullpen. Like, you could make a strong argument that this is one of, if not the best non-closer relief pitcher. Seriously, I think that there is definitely something to that. And the Toronto Blue Jays added that guy to their bullpen. So we're going to be seeing Tyler Rogers a ton. But then you also have Jose Barrios and Eric Lauer slotted in there at the bottom parts. And we still don't know exactly how they're going to utilize those two guys. I think we have maybe a clearer picture with Eric Lauer because we did start to see it at the end of last year. Jose Barrios, though, we're not sure yet. But either way, adding two quality individuals like that, long guys, to the pen, that's bound to help, as well with Tyler Rogers. So I look at this bullpen and the trickle-down effect from adding in and from boosting up that starting pitching staff, the trickle-down effect is real. I do think that this team is going to have significantly more wins coming from the pitching staff than it did in 2025. And I know it's all doom and gloom with no Bo Bichette, but overall, this is the team war. Projected war, okay? Projected war, so we still got to actually go out and play the bloody games. But Toronto right now has the second most projected war in all of baseball, right behind the LA Dodgers. So, I mean, the offense, yes, it did take a step back, but that pitching staff improved dramatically, and you can see that they have 18.6 WAR designated to the, and this is the entirety of the pitching staff, so not just the starters, but the bullpen as well. I can't sort this graph by pitching staffs, but just a quick glance at it, that definitely looks to be top 10 in all of baseball. And if that's where this roster can be, and I think that's where it's going, then we're gonna be a really solid squad in 2026. It just means that the identity of this team has shifted from being a team that hits first and asks questions later. And don't get me wrong, they're still going to do that. The offense is still going to be able to perform at a really high clip, high caliber. But I think that what they've done this offseason is they've balanced it out. They want to take what they did in 2023, having the incredible pitching staff, and they want to marry that with what they did last year, having the incredible offense. And if you can do that, then now we're a balanced squad. And if somebody does go down with injury, it's not as big of a deal because there are other ways to win. So start thinking about this Toronto Blue Jays identity differently, because even though the offense might not be as good, they are still going to win a lot of games. But folks, let me know what you think about all this in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, go Jays go.